Well, good evening. Sue Hutchins here yet again with another time with you from the Iowa Prison Perspective channel. This particular channel is still supported by the Iowa Justice Action Network, Living Beyond the Bars of Iowa, and Iowa Cure. It's a collaboration to inform you, the public, about a variety of different subjects and from a variety of different perspectives about prison here in Iowa. Tonight is a little bit different. Normally, what I do is an interview with somebody who has been impacted by the criminal justice system, and I actually speak with them. I thought that because if you're familiar at all, if you keep up with the news at all, and you're familiar at all with the Mendez brothers case, they murdered their parents, and it's been 35 years ago. They've been incarcerated now for 35 years in California, and they have a hearing on Monday to look at the possibility of them getting out of prison. They were sentenced to life, and this hearing will make a determination on whether or not they will be eligible for parole in that state. There are a number of states in this country that life does not mean natural life. It means a number of years with the possibility of parole. One of the things that we've worked with in Iowa is trying to get that passed here so that life would not mean life, natural life, because natural life is actually the equivalent of the death penalty, death by incarceration. And we don't have the death penalty in Iowa. The Iowa Code does have a provision for the possibility for parole through commutation. The governor has the ability and the right to commute a lifer's sentence to a number of years, therefore making them eligible to meet with the parole board and possibly get paroled if they meet the criteria and are viewed as rehabilitated. And I wanted to give you some information about the process and the way that it has worked in Iowa over the years, because I think it's really important for the public to understand and to know and to have the information about how that particular sentence and a lot of other sentences, how they actually work in our state. The way it stands right now, there are a number of legislators who really believe that life should mean life, natural life, and are not in favor of parole. And thus far, even though we've had a great number of people who have applied for commutation and have had their interviews, and even though there are at least 5 who have been recommended for commutation by the Board of Parole, the governor, excuse me, I had a frog in my throat. The governor has chosen to not commute any of the sentences, not grant any kind of second chance for any of these lifers. So we have a significant number of lifers here in Iowa who have done 35, 40, 45, up to 50 years incarcerated with absolutely no opportunity for parole, for relief. I just thought that I would give you a little bit of history about how that has evolved in the state of Iowa. As a lifer in Iowa, there is but one chance at freedom, a commutation of sentence by the governor. The commutation process used to be very productive and very fruitful for the criminal justice system. From 1945 to 1983, there were 211 commutations granted to inmates serving life without parole sentences in Iowa. From 1983 to 2020, there were 10 commutations granted. This is a dramatic decrease from 211 in 38 years to 10 in 37 years. The lifer population in those 38 years prior to 1983 was substantially lower than the population we have today in Iowa. It should go without saying that a large percentage of Iowa's lifers prior to 1983 had a great deal of hope that if they did the right things and make the right changes during their incarceration, they would be given a real opportunity and chance at a life outside of prison. Clearly, not all lifers were given that chance, some due to their refusal to change, some due to the nature of their crime, but many had the belief that they could have a chance, and if they worked toward it, they could gain the opportunity for parole. Why the dramatic change in commutations? Did the men and women serving this sentence become less worthy of having their sentence commuted than their predecessors? Did those granted commutation do something horrendous to render the commutation system no longer a viable option? Did Iowa citizens become outraged that those deemed worthy of a second chance by the justice system, as provided by the Iowa Constitution, were being returned to society? The answer to all three of these questions is a resounding no. Iowa's commutation system fell under the same arbitrary and political get tough on crime and criminals thinking of the 1980s and 1990s that has so harmed the criminal justice system as we know it today. And what we call that today is mass incarceration. In the mid 1990s, the Iowa Code, section 902.2, was changed concerning the commutation for lifers. Prior to this change, the Board of Parole reviewed every lifer on the 5th, 10th, 13th, and 15th year of incarceration, and yearly thereafter for the possible recommendation for the commutation of a sentence. Today, there is no review by the Board of Parole unless the Class A felon lifer applies for commutation consideration, and that application process can only happen once every 10 years. So it has gone from a mandatory hearing or interview with the Board of Parole for lifers at set years and set markers to only if the lifer actually applies for commutation, and they can only do that every 10 years. History reflects that under the old system, the success of Iowa lifers released from prison through the commutation process, using careful screening by the Bureau of Prisons and the governor, was very high. The fact that no grouping of paroled inmates has been as successful upon release as these lifers. Of the 33 former lifers released on commutation since 1970, only one returned to prison with a subsequent felony, while only 4 others returned on parole violations. That is a recidivism rate of only 8.25%. However, the story here is even bigger than the system's failings to have lived up to the procedural system it once had. Judge Power Ford wrote in the United Kingdom when he outlawed the life without parole sentence in the United Kingdom, hope is an important and constitutional aspect of the human person. Those who commit the most abhorrent and egregious of acts and who inflict untold suffering upon others nevertheless retain their fundamental humanity and carry within them the capacity to change. To deny them the experience of hope would be to deny the fundamental aspect of their humanity, and to do that would be degrading. So this particular book, that's a reading out of this particular book, which I put together, which is 27 lifers here in Iowa's stories about their attempt for commutation, their application and their attempt for commutation in 2022, when the governor had talked a lot about second chance. And like I said at the beginning of this, the reason that I'm bringing this to your attention right now is because we're looking at the president-elect has talked about bringing back the death penalty. There are people in the state of Iowa, politicians and people in the state of Iowa, who are interested in bringing back the death penalty. Although what we know about the public, the general feeling in the public is that we don't want to bring back the death penalty. We have studies that show that. And there's an organization called Iowans Against the Death Penalty that has that data if you're interested in reading that. The governor has, like I said, not seen fit to commute anybody, and there have not been commutations in the last 30 some years, which means that life means a natural life at this point for people who have been convicted of a Class A felony. I think it's important to know that a Class A felony that has a mandatory life without the possibility of parole does not mean that somebody actually took the life of someone else. The accomplice to a murder or the death of another person is also a Class A felony. So people who were not part of actually taking a life, but were there in one form or another when a life was taken, whether it was planned or not, when a life was taken, are given a life sentence also. And kidnapping, when there was not a life taken, is also when it involves another sentence, another serious sentence, crime is also a life sentence. So we have people who are doing life in prison who have not taken a life. We also have in the Iowa Code a provision for people to be able to get out of prison, at least have the opportunity to get out of prison on a life sentence. And it has not been acknowledged as far as actually happening for about the last 35 years. I just want people to know that and be able to think about that, given what's happening in other states and now what's happening, like with the Menendez brothers, pretty large cases that have really gained a lot of public attention, where actual murders happened at the hands of the boys. The boys actually killed their parents. So please give that some thought and let me know what you think. Let me know if you agree that life should mean life, or if you think that people who have committed an egregious crime, Class A felony, ought to have a second chance if their behavior and their attitude and their rehabilitation warrants that second chance. So I will leave you with that for now, and I hope to hear from you. Once again, Sue Hutchins. And if you'd like to get in touch with me, I can be found at iowaprisonperspectives@gmail.com. And that's iaprisonperspectives@gmail.com. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope to hear from you. Take good care, and good night for now.